Thank you, Leo. Greetings, everyone. As we give folks a minute to join, we're going to start with a music video some have seen and some may have not. Very popular in Venezuela. Uh, No to war, yes to peace. You'll see what I mean in 1 second.
Not war, yes peace, forever, forever, forever. Decirle al pueblo de Estados Unidos, no a la guerra. No queremos una guerra en el Caribe ni en Sudamérica. No, not war, yes peace. No a la guerra loca. No crazy war, no, 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 no. ¿Cómo se dice en inglés? Please, please, please. Yes, peace. Listen to me. Yes, peace. Peace forever. Peace forever. Peace forever. Esto se llama lenguaje tarzaneado.
So we thought that would be an excellent way to start off our important and critical discussion here today, not to take the issue of U.S. threats against Venezuela and U.S. war against Venezuela lightly by any means, but to recognize the humanity and the resilience and resistance of the Venezuelan people at this very dangerous time, I think is important. I really want to welcome people to tonight's webinar. My name is Allison Bodine. I am one of the co-founders of the Venezuela Solidarity Network, as well as the coordinator of Fire This Time Movement for Social Justice Venezuela Solidarity Campaign. And I'm joining here from Vancouver, Canada, the unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam nations. My co-chair and co-host tonight is Leonardo Flores, also a founder of the Venezuela Solidarity Network, a Venezuelan living in the US, analyst and organizer. And we're glad to welcome you into this space of education and discussion tonight. Of course, the critical nature of today's discussion every day seems to grow. We are really fortunate that as we sit here today, we have a large delegation, over a dozen of people from across the United States that have come back from Venezuela, that traveled there under threats from the US government, some of whom didn't make it there because of these ongoing threats by the US government, and are ready to report back on their experiences. Report back their experience, what they learned from Venezuelans fighting back every day against the US war machine, organizing and mobilizing in defense of their sovereignty and self-determination. The Venezuela Solidarity Network is a 2-year now old, but still new in the scheme of things, a North America-based network of organizations and individuals working to defend Venezuela's sovereignty and self-determination against US government-led sanctions and attacks. We'll put lots of links in the chat as we go, but I encourage you to join and find out more about the Venezuela Solidarity Network, and there'll be opportunity for that tonight. Without further ado, I'd like to recognize Leonardo Flores, ask him to give a few words about the context of today's meeting, and introduce our first speaker.
Thanks so much, Allison. It's great to see so many folks out here tonight. Obviously, yesterday we had this kind of false alarm that Trump was about to declare military actions against Venezuela. Thankfully, that did not occur. But, you know, Venezuela is very much in the crosshairs, and it's really great that we have so many people that were actually able to go to Venezuela within the past month, and I'm very eager to hear what they have to say. And then after this meeting, we're going to continue to have after this initial discussion of the report backs and the Q&A, we're going to have a kind of broader meeting to discuss ideas and more of an organizing meeting. So hopefully folks can stick around for that. You know, it's really troubling what's going on, of course. And now we know that this escalation is now, it's happening on many different levels. So, you know, the economic war continues. Trump has not just said that it's clearly about oil, but now he's claiming to own Venezuelan land. I don't know where he got that from. But in some ways, that tweet or truth social post from Trump was a bit of a gift because it finally really lays bare what this is about, and it's obviously about Venezuela's resources, and it's about the United States' attempt to control Latin America, which had been kind of put on the back burner for a couple of decades since at least the war on terror, if not a little bit before that as well. And now they've shifted their view entirely to Venezuela. With that, I'm going to pass it on to our first speaker, which is David Paul. David Paul is a member of the Embassy Protection Collective who fought to defend the Embassy of Venezuela in the United States against right-wing attack and takeover in 2019. He's also a member of the SanctionsKill Coalition, the Task Force in the Americas, and the Democratic Socialists of America. Take it away, David. Thanks for coming.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to talk mostly about my experience with the communes. I went to observe the commune elections that happen every 3 years and the Solidarity Conference called the Assembly for Sovereignty and Peace. But many people ask me here, what's the mood of the people there from what I saw in those couple of weeks? And in spite of all the incredible threats that they're living under, most life is going on as normal. People mainly say, well, what can we do? We're not going to walk around in panic. And people are shopping. There's festivals, cultural events, youth concerts, poetry fairs. There's lots of things going on, just looks as normal in the streets. But people are aware of this looming threats, but they're not going to change their daily life for it. In that sense, the U.S. has lost the psychological war as part of their war to really change the way people live and put people in panic. I went first to the conference, just say a few words because I know people later are going to say more. I was very impressed with the statements by party and government leaders, as well as representatives of many organizations from other countries, emphasizing how this war on Venezuela is a real threat to all of Latin America. And they emphasized the need for unity within Venezuela and within the region. And they were so passionately determined to continue this project, this building a just society with collectivism as the main thrust, and defend it with their lives. It was very, I saw more passion and determination than I've ever seen in any other conference, and that was fitting for the time. And one of the best examples of developing this kind of society, a society that empowers the people, popular democracy, is the formation of communes, which was brought up continually. The slogan of commune or nothing was a common slogan throughout. And Chavez himself said that the communes is the building block for building a socialist society. There are over 4,000 communes. They represent a group of communities in a geographical area. They're made up of different neighborhood community councils, some of them that pre-existed Chavez, that have come together to collaborate and work on their common needs. They usually have a single and sometimes multiple means of production to generate funds to meet those needs, often a community bank, a pharmacy, and they have these many committees with representatives focusing on certain needs, but they have a general assembly, which is the final decision-making body, which everyone in the community can join and voice their concerns. There's debates, and they see that this development of these communes as one of the best defenses against the ongoing problems they always have with local governments, local elites, even government ministries, and the government coalition party sometimes. So that really in defense of their communities and empowering the people at the base is the function of these communes. And the evidence that the national government is committed to this process is when they appointed Angel Prado, one of the campesino leaders of one of the largest communes, long-standing communes. Angel Prado is the minister of communes. And these commune elections, it was set up about a year ago to have every 3 months, the people in each commune vote for a specific project that they want help with. and they're usually infrastructure projects. Each commune had, the ones we visited, had 7 options, and they vote on it. And they're usually things related to infrastructure, helping the water, irrigation in the fields, electricity, things to do with fixing the roads. And the government gives $10,000 to each commune for those projects. And that's a lot of commitment because there's a lot of projects. I traveled with the Minister of Communes and 2 activists from Cuba and Argentina to visit a few communes in the area bordering Colombia. We visited 2 communities to observe their elections, and it was really exciting to see the enthusiasm people had because they knew they were voting for something that was going to really affect their lives and their community. And they also recognized that this can only happen in the context of a government that's committed to helping the working class. And Chavez often said that these communes can't exist in isolation. They'll be swallowed up by the systems that still persist around them. And so they formed with that sentiment, they formed the Commune Union in 2019, where they often send, they're called brigades of young activists to visit different communes and encourage them to collaborate with each other, to help each other, share resources with each other. And I traveled on one of these brigades to the southern Amazon state of Amazonas of Venezuela for 4 days with 4 or 5 young organizers of the Commune Union. And they did multiple workshops. They tailor these visits to communes depending on the needs and nature of each commune. And these were mostly indigenous communes. It's the area of the most diverse indigenous cultures and languages in all of Venezuela. And they do workshops, political education, workshops on helping to organize the community itself, technical talks related to cattle and fishery. And in the one of the ones we did, they did workshops on and visits in the assembly. The people who were fishing needed a freezer to keep the fish before they could take it and sell it places. They had no freezer, and they had to eat it or sell it quickly before it rotted. And it was interesting to see these indigenous campesinos talking about class struggle and their analysis of geopolitical situations in a couple different indigenous languages and Spanish. It was very inspiring, these assemblies, and how conscious and dedicated they were to improving their community. There's also a structure that was created, the University of the Communes, where professionals, technical, academic, will lend their services and visit communes who need help with certain technical or organizational matters, and also people who have life skills but no actual title or certification can go there and get certified in the skills that they've developed and actually get titles, so it helps them in job and opportunities. And with all the challenges that they're faced with, looming threats of invasion, the ongoing war, economic war, I was so impressed with the level of consciousness and commitment of these organizers in the Commune Union, but in the activists in the communes themselves. They're all constantly educating themselves, reevaluating, questioning what they're doing, finding better solutions. And to me, the reality of seeing these working class people working together, trying to organize themselves, it's the biggest threat to these corporate fascist elites that want to take power again in this country. And it's also the best defense against them. And I think there's much to learn from the way they're organizing themselves. And it's important that we defend their struggle, because their struggle, as they often told me during our visits, their struggle is our struggle. And they constantly use this, and it's not hyperbole, in the conference and in the communes, that US imperialism is a threat to all humanity. So we all have to close ranks. And that's what they're trying to do in Venezuela. And we need to join them. That's all. I'll leave it at that.
Thanks so much, David. Uh, Definitely share your enthusiasm for the communes, and we're very grateful that you were able to go and share your thoughts with us today. Up next, we have Yhamir Chabur, who's going to be on just a video. Yhamir Chabur is a young Colombian-American born and raised in New York City. He works as a tenant organizer, advocating and fighting for the rights of tenants in New York City against the forces of displacement and gentrification. He's a member and comrade of the Venezuela Solidarity Network. And I believe Allison has Yhamir's video.
Greeting, comrades. Great to see everybody. Unfortunately, I was unable to join due to personal engagements, but I myself, like the rest of the panelists, had the opportunity to be in Venezuela last week for last week's conference, the International Assembly for Peace, promoting peace and sovereignty for Venezuela and of the region. I would say from this last trip, because I've been to Venezuela already a couple of times, um, I really got to grasp this understanding of that defending Venezuela isn't just about defending Venezuela, it's also defending the whole region, the whole Latin American region. I had the opportunity to really um, build with the different groups that were there, from the Colombians, the Ecuadorians, the Puerto Ricans, people from the Caribbean, brothers and sisters from Trinidad and Tobago. But yeah, I got this sense of like um, folks also rely from these different countries for the Venezuelan revolution to be a success in order for it to um, in order for them to have successful projects in their own country. As we see a region, South America, as the right wing is slowly trying to win back terrain. We've seen these recent elections in Chile, where they elected Antonio Cast, who is a far right candidate, presidential candidate. Um, he, as well as the son of a literal Nazi. It's not just like figuratively. His father was a um, person that was part of the Third Reich, a soldier in the Nazi regime of Germany, um, and as well as this person is running a campaign. Kass ran a Trump-like campaign with wanting to attack immigrants. But the main point of this is that there are, like, the right is taking over again the continent. As we see a pendulum swing, we've seen them have Argentina, Paraguay. This year, Bolivia went to the right. Ecuador, and right now in Honduras, they're contesting between whether the right wing will take that, or if the Libre Party still stays and is able to maintain power. But going back to Venezuela, yes, this as we see, this aggression is nothing more, nothing less part of the legacy of the Monroe Doctrine. This is the Trump administration exerting back this 200-year-old policy in the region, what they're calling the Monroe Doctrine, and wanting to once again have a hegemony over the region of Latin America and the Caribbean. But they have to understand that this time, the region is different now. The region has awoken. It has a doctrine, as what the Venezuelans are saying, the Bolivarian doctrine, the doctrine of understanding that they are leading with the spirit of Simón Bolívar, the grand liberator of Latin America, the one who liberated various countries in the region, wanting to unite everybody into a grand Colombia federation. And they lead with that spirit, that ideology of Bolivar, of José Martí from Cuba, José San Martín from Argentina, Francisco Morazán from Honduras, Manuelita Sáenz of Ecuador, of standing their ground against imperialism. But I think more than that, I also see that the people in Venezuela do not really they're very calm. I've seen them, like, speaking to different people. They go day to day, very calm, very relaxed, but on high alert, knowing that at any moment the United States could invade their country. they've already been under so much threat and attacks and psychological warfare from the United States for the past 25 years, well, 27, I believe, since the start of the revolution. So they're already used to the United States trying to meddle in their country's affairs. But the people of Venezuela are a resilient people. They're going to push forward, and yeah, also, I think that this we also have to see as people from the United States, people coming from the imperialistic core, how this would also affect us in here. When we talk about like the mass migration, like in like with the situation of people seeking refuge from countries which the U.S. intervened, um, this same thing would happen even more if an invasion were to happen in Venezuela, because this would also spill over to neighboring countries like Brazil, like Colombia, and this would create massive exodus into the United States. And as well, we would have more persecution, as we see this here with Trump ramping down on immigrant communities with ICE. I feel that this would be more if we see if this were to happen, as well as our own tax dollars going into this. Um, this would also affect the economy as we see people not having access to food stamps, not having access to housing, uh, healthcare. So this would be more increased, and also the militarization of our cities in the United States. So I think it's very important that we have a duty, we have a automatic duty inside the imperialistic core to really protest against this war, because we cannot allow these far right Nazis in the White House to lead us to basically what could be World War III, or a war in our hemisphere, in our America's hemisphere, because it would just be drastic for all of us. Um,
Thank you very much to Yhamir for recording that video and for contributing, even though he had to work tonight and was unable to join the report back. Next up, I want to introduce Mairead Gillis. Mairead is here from Workers' World Party and was part of the recent delegation as well. Mairead, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, it's perfect. Welcome.
Great. Thank you, Allison. Hi, everyone. Yeah, my name is Mairead. I'm a member of Workers' World Party, and I also organize with the Venceremos Brigade to Cuba, the Nicaragua Solidarity Coalition, and the Boston Coalition for Palestine. And I've got 5 minutes here. I could go on for hours about the importance of this delegation and all that we learned through our participation in the People's Assembly for Peace and Sovereignty in our Americas, with representatives from over 40 countries. Panelists throughout the event highlighted the development of popular power in Venezuela, the resurgence of anti-colonialist resistance in Africa, ending the continued genocide against the Palestinian people, the role of the corporate media in propagating an information war against the socialist processes of the global South, and the need to amplify the voices of the youth generations to strengthen our movements. This was of political significance because it was an opportunity to show unwavering solidarity with the Venezuelan people and the Bolivarian Revolution, and unite internationally across our struggles for liberation against a common enemy. Tactically, it was an important opportunity to defy the illegal US-imposed no-fly zone through the determination to hold this event by any means necessary. We know that most of our delegation and others could not attend because of this no-fly zone, and we took every opportunity to condemn this repression on the Solidarity movement and on Venezuelan sovereignty. We also appreciated getting to soak in the beauty of Venezuela and the revolutionary joy of the people as they continue to advance towards meeting the needs of their people despite so many continued aggressions from the US, which include intensifying sanctions, the seizure of an oil tanker headed for Cuba while we were at this conference, an illegal naval blockade, listing the Venezuelan government on the list of terrorist organizations, and real threats of all-out war for oil and regime change in Venezuela. One key development during our trip that I wanted to share with you all was the formation of the Francisco de Miranda Solidarity Committee between the people of Venezuela and the people of the US, which took place in the socialist commune El Panal 2021 in Caracas. The people in Venezuela really want to know what struggles the working class are up against here in the US and what actions we're taking to escalate our resistance from inside the belly of the beast. And we here in the US need to also know what the realities are in Venezuela to combat all the propaganda being pushed by the Pentagon News. The people of Venezuela are in the streets in the hundreds of thousands almost daily defending their revolution. The world needs to see that they are fully prepared for any war maneuvers, and we need to take note and get prepared here, not only to stop this war for oil, but also to smash this system squeezing the entire planet and replace it with one built by us. The most important question that I really want to stress as we organize moving forward is what steps do we need to take to strengthen our movements here in the US and Canada and from everywhere that we're joining tonight. Venezuela models how to organize through their intentional united front that includes all sectors of society, unions, workers, students, indigenous communities, housing collectives, social justice organizations, the PSUV, and government itself. This unity is what makes it possible for them to train disciplined armed militias, constantly bring the masses out into the streets day after day, and construct self-determination on the community level, like David was talking about in the comunas. The Venezuelan government even organized an international anti-fascist front over a year ago to spread this participation to committees formed on every continent of the globe that are taking direct action against fascist threats to this day. We practiced United Front tactics on a small scale within our US delegation, made up of representatives from different organizations across the left that took part in the Coordinated National Week of Action to demand no US war on Venezuela, no troops in our streets in November. At the conference, we developed our strategies for participation collectively. We moved as a unit and delegated tasks based on different comrades' abilities. We maintained a principled political line for peace, even when encountering intelligentsia forces or opposition, which was not a lot, but did happen, and prioritized the safety of the group. We prepared extensively to come back to continue our work in the streets with militant unity between our organizations with the goal of reaching more sectors of the working class that are struggling to survive while bombs are shipped overseas. This was all practice for what we need to do here in the belly of the beast. The main takeaway from the delegation is that we need each other, all of us, and a whole lot more of us to carry out our own revolution here relevant to this context that will have an impact on the entire globe. The legacy of our revolutionary heroes like Chavez and Che and Fidel, Malcolm X and Harriet Tubman and Assata Shakur remind us that we must continue to fight like hell together with the revolutionary optimism that we will be successful. Those of us in Workers' World Party have been putting out and are putting out a call to the entire movement for the formation of a united front against fascism and imperialism, separate from the ruling war parties in Washington, not just in name, but in practice and action taken together in the streets to strengthen collectively to widen our outreach efforts nationally in a coordinated way, to unite to fight and show the current dominant class that all of their attempts to divide us will be unsuccessful. So many of our organizations share similar revolutionary lines, and we have more in common with each other than we do with our class enemy. The differences that we do have are a point to struggle forward around, putting sectarianism aside, as our friends in Cuba and Venezuela are telling us that we need to do. We're engaging across so many campaigns to address the challenges that our class is up against, none of which exist within a vacuum. Venezuelan sovereignty and the US blockade on Cuba are class issues, and so are the cuts to social benefits, ICE raids, and access to gender-affirming care here in the US. If we want to see an end to all US wars at home and abroad, if we want to overthrow capitalism, we need a united front. So that's my message tonight. I hope we can keep having this conversation and figure out how we put it into action in the next coming period with more actions, more demonstrations, more unity in the spirit of Simón Bolívar. So viva Venezuela, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Maria. That was great. I'm so glad that you're so connected to Latin America solidarity movements. Up next, we have Elizabeth Blaney. Elizabeth is a community organizer and a popular educator. She's in the leadership and is a co-founder of the Unión de Vecinos. And Unión de Vecinos is a community-based organization that co-founded the LA Tenants Union. Welcome, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Leonardo, and thank you to everyone who is taking the time to learn about what's going on in Venezuela. So there's a couple things that I wanted to highlight. One has to do with the consultas populares. And I think one of the biggest thing that has come out of that is democracy, because as you hear Trump constantly, and all of the fake news that we get is that Maduro's a dictator and there's no democracy in Venezuela, which we all here on this call know that that is not true. But in practice, you actually see that. So David explained, the purpose of the Consulta Populares, but I think one of the things to highlight is everywhere in Venezuela, since they have several laws around popular power and the comunas, there are communal councils. Not all of them are active yet, but every part of Venezuela has been in the formation of a communal council. And a communal council, think of it as a defined territory in your neighborhood of your neighbors, and then you come together in an assembly. And assembly, you talk about the priorities and the needs that you have in your community. And a lot of the things that we saw come up there was a gymnasium for youth, water, buses to take people up the hill to where they live, generators, water filtration systems, redoing of piping, just even in more of the urban comunas where there's also housing comunas, it's roof repair. So these are the types of projects addressing very basic needs as a community. One of the requirements, as they would come in and develop these proposals, there were 7 proposals, and one of the requirements was that it had to benefit all of the comunas. And then the project that would get the most votes would be $10,000 to implement those projects, and you'd have 3 to 4 months to do it, so that then you could have another Consulta Popular and then be able to go through the process again. There were 6 that have been held since April of 2024, and 2 really important things that have come out of that because of the consistency and the frequency of the Consulta Populares. Those communal councils that weren't necessarily active or already had their defined territory, but they were more, as they were being referred to as just paper communal councils, saw what was going on in other neighborhoods, that there were resources for infrastructure and actual benefits to the community. So now that they're being activated. So that's one thing that has been, in addition to all of the great investment. There was $106 million just a few weeks ago that were thrown in across the country and all of the comunas that had these Consulta Populares. The other thing that happened is that there's buy-in, there's more confidence in this democratic process because people are actually seeing the results. And so I think those are two very stark and different ways in which democratic participation is practiced as opposed to here in the United States. The United States, we think of democracy as, okay, we got to vote. Woohoo, you know, for our congressperson, or the worst of two evils for president. And that's how we think of democracy. But in Venezuela, democracy is played out on a local neighborhood level. And it's a constant back and forth between representatives who develop proposals and recommendations, but don't make the final decisions. So they have representatives from different buildings and different blocks that come together that talk about community needs. And then those recommendations get to the assembly, and the assembly is open to everyone who lives in that defined territory, and they debate and they talk about it and they refine those recommendations, and then they vote on it, and that's what gets on the ballot. So democracy is practiced in a very participatory way, in a way where there's lots of dialogue back and forth to develop a proposal that actually addresses community needs. And we don't see that here. And I think that that is something that we should be working towards, learning from, trying to practice within our own organizations, especially in organizations here that do organizing, if that's at your mission, is to be looking at that model, not be accountable to board of directors and foundations, but be accountable to the base in your neighborhood that you're organizing to really address those needs. So I think that's a really big learning thing. Within the LA Tenants Union, we had a brigade. So to give an example of how transformative and the work has been in Venezuela in our context, we had a brigade that went out, 25 people in 2023, that got to learn and witness and be a part of that process. And in the last 2 years, we've been having lots of debates about what does that mean? What do assemblies look like? Our own formation, we have chapters throughout the city of Los Angeles. And just back in August, as a result of the debates and what we've learned from the comunas, we have declared ourselves a socialist organization as the LA Tenants Union. That would not have happened if not for the relationships and the opportunity to engage and be part of this internationalist work between the LA Tenants Union and our Venezuelan comrades. I did want to close with two things, and if it's possible, because I think it's important to also hear from the voices of Venezuelans. And there was an interview that I did of one of the leaders in the 22 de Enero Comuna, especially kind of talking about the current context and climate. Let me see if I could share this, if I'm able to open this up, hopefully. Give me a minute here, sorry about that. While I'm looking for it, the other thing that they have asked of us is, and especially yesterday, I got lots of texts from Venezuelan comrades asking us to post on social media, to saturate a different kind of message in all of our networks around how that we condemn Trump's attempt to colonize Venezuela and to steal its oil, and condemn all of the U.S. aggression. So if you can take 10 to 15 minutes on a daily basis just to post a meme or post a video, that has been a very big request of us, is to be able to do that within our social media networks. And I think the other thing that is important is, I see there's over 100 people on this call. If each one of us made a commitment to go and talk to 10 other people, play this recording, share something that you've learned with 10 other people, and then get them to post, or get them at least to go and talk to other people. We need to change the narrative that's happening in this country, and we also need to change people's own mind and thinking. We know that there's a lot of people on the left who are free Palestine, but have doubts about Venezuela. And I think being able to use these webinars and these series, if we make that commitment today, and hopefully people can put in the chat, I'm down, I'm going to make that commitment, I'm going to talk to 10 people to try and make sure we get more and more people within the United States aware of what's really going on. I have it almost here. So it's in Spanish. So we have someone who'll be able to interpret into English. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. All right.
So remember, just click the globe icon to get the interpretation into English.
All Almost there. Yeah, it's not loading. So maybe I'll send it to Allison. I'm having trouble loading after my phone. But again, thanks again for tuning in, and make sure to share what you've learned with others.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I know you were really just returning in the sense, the literal sense of the word. So we appreciate you coming on so quickly to share your first reflections, and really appreciate everyone focusing us and bringing us together when it comes to talking about action, that we're not just here to talk and to learn, but we are also people that are gathered here. I can see, looking through the list, a lot of activists, a lot of writers, media workers. We are committed to defending Venezuela, and the information you've shared with us is very important to that. So thank you. And when I get the video, I'm happy to cue that up, no problem. To go on to our next speaker, I want to introduce Ray Lee. Ray is an organizer and current chair of Seattle Against War, and a member of the Anti-War Action Network, which made up many of the folks that were there recently were part of the Anti-War Action Network delegation. So Ray, you should be able to speak now.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. This is such an honor. I am a little sick, so I apologize if I have to take some coughing breaks. The other speakers so far have covered some really important ground and have like really beautiful prepared speeches in solidarity with Venezuela. I'm hoping to take a slightly different take. So I'm going to be sharing some photos from the trip, and please excuse me while I really briefly set up the tech for this. Oh, no, JK, never mind. I guess I will just have to send it later. Having some tech issues. Anyway, just to briefly introduce myself, I am a relatively new anti-war organizer. I got started in organizing through workplace organizing about 5 years ago, but it was only when the genocide in Gaza really kicked off, and escalated, that I really joined the direct action and forces on the ground. And it was, I think I see myself as actually a really similar template to a lot of folks in America who grow up not even realizing that they have the public education system that they go through is perpetuating US imperial propaganda. It took really deliberate unlearning in the last few years to be able to deconstruct like how much of what I thought of as neutral or objective education was basically grooming us to be supporting US imperialism abroad, to support foreign wars abroad, and to support this exploitation of the global South. And so with that, when I had the honor of being part of this delegation, I really wanted to go and bring back the narratives, the stories, and the observations to specifically combat a lot of these propaganda that we just find ourselves inundated by just nonstop from not just mainstream media, but from other politically active folks, as folks were saying, like even amongst Palestine solidarity organizers, I am encountering a lot of these like misinformations, right? So one of the beautiful things that I realized as soon as I set soil in Venezuela is that it was my first time visiting a country that had a that was not friendly to US imperialism and to Western imperialism. And everybody that I talked to had a very clear and accurate picture of the geopolitical situation, of where the source of their misery and of suffering comes from, which is these violent sanctions, right? And here in the States, when I organize and when I talk to folks on the ground, our picture is so distorted that we don't even realize that these talking points from the current ruling class don't even make sense. They don't actually cohere with each other. And so, um, as I was talking to folks on the ground, the immediate first thing that I tried to collect were all the diversity of opinion, right? Because one of the main pieces of propaganda that we see here against Venezuela that really manufacture consent for this war on Venezuela is that it's an authoritarian government, it's a dictatorship, and that the government basically is the source of the people's misery. And I think that first of all, the people that I talked to, even at the conference, there was actually quite a diversity of opinion, the people that we talked to who worked for the government. And when we were able to visit the La Comuna Panal, being able to talk to the workers who have a deep and nuanced understanding of the project, the Bolivarian Revolution project that they are embarking on, and how, or not embarking on, continuing, and how it is through building their own self-sufficient economy that they're able to push back against things like the US sanctions. So there was a piece of literature that was given to us by Sierra, who was helping guide our tour at La Comuna Panal, and it talks about how during the shutdown, during COVID, like they were really struggling, and these external pressures meant that they had to really quickly accelerate some of their internal self-governance projects, as well as like how to have sustenance, right? And I think that we have so much to learn from the Venezuelan people's participatory democracy and how they are able to act in such collective unity. And when I talk to, and I don't know how many of you know this, but in Seattle, we have a lot of anarchist forces, for instance, and I call some of them friends, and we are in the streets together. But one of the misconceptions they have is that these communes, right, in Venezuela are like decentralized and like that there's this kind of anarchy of production. And that is completely not true, right? So when we talked to the folks at the communes and they share their history, what we learn is that as they were, building up their productive forces, they relied on financing from the government to actually help get their projects off the ground. And once it is really able to generate its own profits, then they can actually collectively make the decision to reinvest those fundings into projects that they vote on. And I was like, wow, this is a completely different picture than what I had been told like the communes are about. And it, when we hear this picture here in the States that like the state is authoritarian and that there is no point to having this like centralized coordination, and that like only grassroots without any level of coordination or collectivization, I think that it's doing a real disservice to the Venezuelan people's very clear vision of how they are transforming their own state, like how they are transforming their own state, right, to be a socialist. And I just have such respect for when we saw the excuse me. We visited not just La Comuna Albana, but we also had the honor of being at La Comuna oh my God, Amilavaca, where President Maduro was visiting, and he was able to actually celebrate the various projects that this commune had achieved. And so we were able to actually see as well, like the products that they generate, like the infrastructure projects that they have, planned out for 2026. It goes to show like, oh, this is incredibly complex what they are doing and what they are achieving under enormous pressure. And through the Solidarity Committee that Mireille just talked about with Workers' World Party, I hope that we can continue to bring back the lessons from the Venezuelan people about how they are able to just really grow their participatory democracy, and to be like sharing it with our folks like, hey, listen, like, do you feel like our government is basically not representative and doesn't actually represent our interest. And like when we show up to city councils and we say, okay, we don't want mass surveillance, we don't want our taxes to fund bombs, like what happens? They go on ahead, right? Because here we have the bourgeois like controlling, excuse me, sorry, I'm getting really worked up. Without without the workers having control over the means of production and like how are our taxes being used, we can clearly see that it is actually the monopoly capitalists who control where our funding goes. And it is not in our interest, it is not in the interest of the, you know, the world, like for climate justice, for sustainability, for not having these forever wars. Nobody like we kept on telling people when we met folks in Venezuela, like 70% of Americans do not want this war. And so when I would have conversations with, we had the honor of also speaking to some officials at the women's ministry dinner, and we asked, how can we be in solidarity with you? And effectively what she told us was, actually, how can we be in solidarity with you? And as you fight against, you know, these your elite who don't represent your interests, right? And so I just have been really carrying this like gratitude and love for how the Venezuelan people and their fight, their revolutionary spirit has really expanded the horizon. And I really want to share this with like every organizer here in Seattle. And basically, how can we, as Mairead was saying, right, apply the spirit towards like building a united front action, right? Like we have to recognize that like our petty differences aside, we actually have a common enemy. And it really behooves us to like be conscious of how all of these things that are distractions for us, right? The current mainstream media is so dead set on putting using our cultural warfare to split us. And so at the conference, you know, we heard about cognitive warfare, and you know, the Venezuelans have a much, I think, more nuanced and complex understanding of that than even we do. And I took down a lot of notes. But I just think about, for instance, just one example to close. We see a lot of pinkwashing, right, in the imperialist propaganda. So when we look at Gaza, like, you know, the Zionist entity has spent a lot of money using queer identity as a way to wedge this divide. And we see this in so many other countries where there are successful socialist revolutions. And so I made a point to talk to folks who are queer and who are young Afro-Indigenous activists who are attending this conference from other parts of Venezuela. Hey, like, what has your experiences been like under this government? And they were very honest, right? Like, I think there's like this recognition that their experiences and like the shift in culture is still slow to come, even if their rights are protected under the Constitution. But there's a palpable sense of ownership and agency and autonomy that they have, right? Like as part of their like youth organizing locally, as well as in solidarity with other Latin American countries. Like, and they were shocked by some of the stories that I shared about like what it's like to be queer here in the United States, where we are told that we are so free, but the material reality is that you know, we have trans folks who are constantly being murdered in our and there's this like very material basis for the oppression of trans folks in the US that until the like liberal culture will not save like queer people in the US, right? We actually need the solidarity with all those who are resisting US imperialism. And we have actually a special duty. And I really came away from this trip with that sense that we have this duty and that it is for our future to be fighting US imperialism here right at home in the belly of the beast. So solidaridad, viva Venezuela.
Thank you so much, Ray. I hope you're feeling better soon. And yeah, I think what you said really encapsulates what Venezuela's participatory and protagonistic or protagonical of democracy really is, right? And lessons it can offer for us, because I really want to emphasize that prior to Chavez, Venezuela wasn't just an oligarchy, it was ruled by a duopoly of parties that had had control for decades. And Chavez broke that with the people, using their own system and their own rules, and then changing it through a referendum that established Venezuela's constitution. So thanks so much for your comments, Ray. Up next, we have Selena de la Croce. Selena is an activist, editor, writer, and the publications director at the Tricontinental Institute for Social Research. She has organized for more than a decade in labor, anti-imperialist, and other working class struggles. Welcome to the webinar, Selena. Thank you so much for being here. And while you say hello, I'm going to be uploading that video that you wanted to share.
Thank you so much, comrades from the Venezuela Solidarity Network, for organizing this, and everyone for being here. It's really great to see this many folks on the call, and also to hear thoughts from the different people who were in Venezuela recently. And I'll say more in a minute after the video, but I think there are definitely some strong themes for a reason about democracy and popular participation and other things. And so I wanted to just share, in the words of a 7-year-old who's part of the Commune Art Union, one of the communes in Barinas, which is Chavez's home state. I went to a course recently, a youth course for the Commune Art Union that took place in this very, very small town in Barinas. And I asked this young 7-year-old girl just some questions about what she was participating in. And well, you'll hear the questions, but I just wanted to share it first in her words before going into mine. Okay, I'll try to speak.
I am 7 years old. I'm here from Parroquia de la Luz, Municipio Obispo Nicolás Silva. I am here for the revolution, for the commune, and for socialism. Thank you. What did you learn at today's class? I learned a lot of things that I found okay. So far, we're going strong. Why are you fighting here? What's your struggle? To be stronger and to grow and grow more in the commune. What does the commune mean to you? To me, commune means life. Can you tell me a bit more about that? Explain. To me, the commune is the best so far, because it will always be the commune that we build together. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, that's hard to follow up, I guess. I almost could leave it there, but I think we heard a lot. I don't think I can follow that up, so I might just leave it there. But no, it was wonderful to hear from other comrades about what it was like to participate. Sorry, I'm just going to change my screen. What it was like to participate in the different communal processes and different kind of popular power processes in Venezuela. And I think, I don't know, something that certainly had a very strong impact on me was hearing this girl's 7 years old, and so there was over 120 young people. Most of them were teenagers, but just with a clarity that, like, I don't know. I think we should talk, and it's very valuable to talk about what solidarity means. But I think we have, like other comrades said, a very strong responsibility to not only to be in solidarity, which we could define and probably should, in the United States, but to build a class struggle here, and to take inspiration from, despite all of the kind of misinformation and lies that we hear, a society where you have people as young as 7 articulating what, that the popular processes that they're engaged in mean life. Like, it's just, I don't know, to me that kind of left me speechless, and so I'm like, well, what's the point of even saying anything? She said it all. But to elaborate, I think, on what other folks said here and what this young girl said, I think there are a few things that stand out to me in particular, many of which were named. I think one is, to me, is democracy, and as part of that, popular power is the term that they use here, or use in Venezuela, dignity, as well as sovereignty. I think understanding how, like, what the priorities are in Venezuela, and also kind of the ways in which both the revolutionary government and society at large walk the walk. It's not just talking, but it's like how are resources used, and also what does that mean in a country under a very heavy U.S. blockade, where resources are often hard to come by, despite being the country with the biggest oil reserves in the world. And I think understanding more about the kind of how the class struggle is at the center of all of these things and what that means for the implications of our work in the U.S. In terms of, maybe to give one other example, I know folks already talked quite a bit about the democratic processes in Venezuela and popular power, but to both give a different example and also think about it in the way of which, like, we're engaged in this information war where we're constantly, I went out to dinner with a friend of a friend the other day just to, meet somebody in the neighborhood I just moved to, and I mentioned I was going to Venezuela and automatically just got this barrage of like, oh, but it's a dictatorship and this and that and the other, and I think all of us probably have an experience like that, and both in the interest of kind of arming ourselves with more weapons and tools in this information war, and also just kind of getting as much of a sense as we can, and hopefully everyone will get the chance to come to Venezuela, which is something that I definitely heard over and over again. I wanted to speak a little bit more about there was a workers' congress this week, and so there were thousands over the last period. There were thousands of assemblies across the country where workers in different, we had different unions, the oil company, Venezuela union, teachers unions, all workers really across the spectrum had these huge assemblies where they talked about, like, what are the challenges facing the working class in Venezuela today, and then not just that, but what are some of the solutions. And I think right now, this has been true, there's a level of escalation, I heard this again and again as well, that it's everyone, I'm sure everyone here has been watching the news, but it's insane, but it's not. I think it's important to highlight also that it isn't coming out of a vacuum, that it's come after, since the first day of the revolution. They kidnapped Chavez in 2002 and tried to overthrow the government. There's a huge crisis in 2017 where the main strategy was, and in large part still is, the use of sanctions that killed more than 40,000 people a year just through lack of access to basic medicines and so on. In that context, not just what are the problems, and there are huge problems, but what are the kind of active solutions, and the government really the revolutionary government and process really leaning into the people and popular processes, and acknowledging that, like, the way that this revolution came about was through the electoral process and inheriting a very, like, capitalist bourgeois state with a very strong elite class that uses every opportunity it can, with ample support from our tax dollars, to try to intervene in the revolution and overthrow the government and intervene in people's right to democracy and to have a voice. And so there's this theater called Teresa Carreño Theater, and delegates were brought from different parts of the country, from different unions, and there was a 26-year-old, I think just also, like, highlighting the importance of youth and building up youth was something else that was pretty extraordinary to me. But this 26-year-old woman kicked off this process of outlining, okay, well, we talked about A, B, and C, and what we think, like, right in front of the president, right? So she's here and he's there, like, okay, President Maduro, like, here's what we think, and here's what we proposed, what do you think? And so the number of different people spoke, brought processes coming out of these assemblies with thousands of people across the country in different sectors. And then Maduro went through, like, one by one, okay, well, this one, aprobado, like, this is approved. You know what, that one actually, and I like the kind of, it's not just like, oh, a publicity stunt of, like, approved. It's like, okay, that one's approved. You know what, that one, I think we need to flesh it out a little bit more, but here's what we're going to do. We're going to have another, meeting like this in January, and I want to hear about, like, how you develop these ideas. So, let's come back to that one. This one's approved. And it's like, just being in the U.S. I think we do have really important struggles, and that's who's on this call right now in the U.S. But, like, we have, I just imagining, like, voting is, we should all vote, of course, but it's like exactly what Leo was saying before. It's this, like, just, I don't want to call it futile, it's maybe a little cynical, but I think working class people certainly are far from having a voice in watching this process where you can be 7 and receive this sort of, like, really dignified and, like, lifting up sort of education, and then, I don't know, just being in your early 20s and getting to engage with the president and, like, represent its broad workers movement with a series of proposals is pretty extraordinary. Yeah.
Just to say, so folks are asking if you can slow down a bit.
Oh,
I'm sure
sorry.
interpreters
Ugh.
would appreciate it too. It's hard.
I'm so sorry. No, you're right. This is my I know. No, I have a very bad habit that I don't know, need to work on. So thank you for the reminder.
No worries.
So yeah, that's kind of one point on, and just feel if I'm going to try, but if I get carried away, please intervene. That's one point just on kind of democracy and popular participation in Venezuela. And another thing that really stood out to me is that in the context of, these assemblies that were called, all of us were asked to come for this assembly for peace, is that there's a call for peace and there's a call for sovereignty, but it goes kind of much deeper than that in the sense of it's not, and this is something Tricontinental just wrote about kind of in preparation for the 60th anniversary of the Tricontinental Conference, which I'd encourage everyone to read about if you can. It's on our website. But thinking about going not just the fight for sovereignty and the ability to define one's own path, because you can say, okay, we're a sovereign country and now the elite has kind of hijacked, now we're like just run by the local elite instead of the US. But certainly not the case in Venezuela. It's a struggle for sovereignty and peace, but also a struggle for dignity, and dignity that's rooted in class struggle. And so just every day, I just can't imagine being a 7-year-old girl and being lifted up in this way, that it's like when we talk about this, when we talk about what U.S. aggression means, and David and I think others highlighted also, like people are going about their lives and going Christmas shopping and spending time with family. But it's also this I don't know, Thomas Sankara talked about this in his own context, but the ability in Burkina Faso of when you stand up, when people learn to stand up, I think that is just so clear when you're in Venezuela, that people have, after being beaten down for so long, like we are in the US, have learned to stand up and have this just really just defining sense. It's in every cell of one's being of dignity, that you can't, we're not going to be bossed around by the US. And that's what we're fighting for, not just to determine our path as a nation, but to determine our path as a nation run by the working class, for the interest of the working class, not only in Venezuela, but around the world, which is something that Jorge Arrea said in his closing words for this Congress, was what we're fighting for isn't just the liberation of the Venezuelan people, but the liberation of all peoples in the world. And so you have a nation that's under severe attack, that's having, we've all seen it, I don't need to repeat it, but Fisher, under this severe, surreal attack, in the midst of that, saying, you know what we're fighting for isn't just us, it's all of us, because everybody deserves the right to dignity, and not just the right to basic things, which they have achieved, like housing and food sovereignty and different things, but the right to be the protagonist of our own history and our own struggle. And I think the other place that we've seen that too, and maybe something that's important to lift up kind of in the face of this information war, is I had the opportunity to see this agroecological school also in the state of Barinas. And in the past couple of years, the last time I was here, I think was 2.5 years ago, how the government has used the resources, largely from the oil sector, although not only to support the revolutionary process and these processes through the communes to develop, different productive processes like sewing work, what are they called? Sewing rooms or whatever, or different productive processes, but also an agroecological school that's training people from across the country and now also across the world. And so it was something that Chavez initiated, in the early years, but with kind of his death and the big setback from the crisis and result of the sanctions was something the school was there, but it was basically abandoned. And in the last 2 years, they've turned with, I don't know, a few tens of thousands of dollars, but really not that much. I have to look up the exact number, really turned around the entire school, or producing both training students, but also producing, pork and milk and different products, and with the goal of becoming self-sustaining, of using the products that they're selling to the community at affordable rates to kind of bring forward and advance this process of agroecology. And so another one of the main kind of interventions that we hear, or propaganda that you hear, is that, you know, isn't Venezuela a problem because it relies on oil? But actually what it's doing with its oil revenues is prioritizing the health of the planet, and through things like this agroecological school. And many of the people were talking about communes before, but it's many of the communards who are going to these schools, learning how to, you know, to farm and produce food effectively with agroecological tools in coordination with like other international organizations like the MST in Brazil, the Landless Workers Movement, and bring that back to their communities. And so, and it's a 5-year program too. It's not like a one-week course. And so I think in terms of, maybe the last point is just thinking about like the solidarity work that we're doing in the US. And I remember there was an anecdote that I like a lot. I'm stealing from my boss, from BJ, who's the director of Tricontinental, that Ho Chi Minh, when there was, I think it was a group of Italians who went to Vietnam in the solidarity movement during the Vietnam War, and asked Ho Chi Minh, what can we do to support your struggle? And he said, you need to go and build a revolution at home. And so I think when we're thinking, and people were really happy to see people, I think international people in general, but especially from the US and here, both about the marches that we've been organizing. And there's a number of different groups here who've been doing different really important efforts, from mobilizations in the street to different interventions. And people were very, I think, uplifted, or like felt reinforced that that effort is happening. And also like seeing that solidarity isn't, someone asked me why solidarity is important, but it's not, I mean, it is important, but it's necessary. And making this connection between like all of the cuts that we're seeing with, not currently with the Trump administration, but far before that, where we have, I don't know, I live in New York, and there are more empty houses than there are homeless people. Elizabeth was speaking from LA. I think we see that in all parts of the country. And so kind of taking this lesson from Venezuela, that class struggle is so deeply rooted in every element of what they do, whether it's the communes or the workers' assemblies, or, you know, really everything. That, I don't know, the task that we have, and I think, and this was the takeaway that I had, is to go back to the US and kind of deepen our class struggle, and in a way that's internationalist, that has all of these lessons rooted in our work, not because it's important, which it is, or not because, you know, we feel bad because it's our government that's wreaking havoc and killing all of these people, but because we're not going to, most Americans or people in the US are closer, you know, are far closer to being homeless than they are to ever being rich. And so I think that's the path forward, and that's what, like, we were talking about, another comrade was talking about the Solidarity Committee that's being put together, but that's really the task that we have, is this two-way solidarity, which means coming home and building a class struggle, and, you know, taking that, everybody here, I think lots of people are from different organizations, but like deepening, going and talking to working people, deepening our mobilization capacity, and seeing this connection that we have with Venezuela as something that can really be a light that leads the way into building a revolutionary process in our own country. So thank you. I hope I didn't go on for too long.
Yeah. Thank you, Selena. I think that's an important point to wrap up this section on. I really appreciate all of the speakers who have helped us to convey not only what happened in Venezuela, what you observed, but the emotion and the message that you wanted to bring home, and really the sense of responsibility I feel all of you took on, whether it was your first or your 21st time to Venezuela, to bring that back and to recommit to organizing. And I think that is the least that we can do as people living in the US and Canada. So we are going to do a Q&A. We do have a bit of time. Some people are having to drop off, no worries, but we hope to see you again in the new year. But we are going to do a Q&A about the recent delegations. If someone has questions, we can do that for a few minutes, and then beyond the next 15 minutes or so, we will do a Q&A and a bit of a presentation about what the Venezuela Solidarity Network is. So if you're able to stay on for that, then we'll have time for that today as well. So I think Leo, excellent co-host that he is, has prepared a first question, which is always important for starting a discussion. So go ahead.
Sure. And let me just mention that if anyone else has a question, just please raise your hand using the reaction button, and then we'll ask you to unmute so you can ask your question directly. Yeah, this is for any and all of you. You know, right now the the fascist far right, the Venezuela's fascists, are basically saying they're pitching this idea that, oh, you know, Maduro can just have a golden parachute and escape to, I don't know, Qatar, or Cuba, or wherever, and then everything is going to be okay in Venezuela, that he's the problem. What do you think the people that you met would say to these fascists? How would they respond? How would the Venezuelans you met respond to this argument that, oh, the issue is just Maduro and that people actually want him to leave?
If there's time, I know we might be over time, but the video that I sent is actually a woman responding to that exact question.
Oh, well then, well, let's have Allison load it and then.
Yeah, so it's a 2 minute response, but just you know,
Perfect.
sometimes it's always better to hear in their words, but it's so funny that that was the question you asked.
That's great.
So this country, this community is recognized in all of our country. You should actually reproduce some of this. What we want to do is defend each other. It's not possible. It shouldn't be that from that country you should affect us. What we do here is we go forward in any way we can. Chavez left Maduro, and with all the difficulties we've seen, we have now a clear conscience and a maturity in order to know that if he's not here, we'll be even more abandoned, because here we have a spirit that is much tougher. We know what could happen if we were to decide that Maduro shouldn't be there. We know how hard it has been for him to be there. We are very clear on that. People shouldn't think that the US can come here and step on our communities. All of these civilizations, all of these people have overcome so many difficulties, infinite difficulties in the past, in the present, and in the future, but we have resisted, we have overcome all of these difficulties. So the message for this people of yours is to follow our example, because we are the light of the world. We light up the world. We are the souls that are wise. We are here together to try and show that these are all lies that are being played out outside. We need to save the world no matter where we are, save humanity no matter where we are. What is happening in Palestine and Ukraine, why are we allowing that? When are we going to stop that? Venezuela is not in a position to allow any of that to happen. If they want to come here so that we can go and defend others, we can do that. And if they want to come here and do what is wrong, we are not going to be with our open arms. We're going to be prepared to stop anyone that wants to bother us. That's Venezuela.
Yeah, that's great. She perfectly encapsulated it. You know, she said very clearly, if we abandon Maduro, we ourselves are going to be abandoned. I think I see John and Nesbitt and John Parker. We're going to start with John Olson. I'm going to ask you to unmute, John. You should be able to. There you go.
Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Okay. Well, clearly Russia and China have a vested interest in what happened in Venezuela, and I'm wondering if they're going to provide some escorts for the oil tankers or other. So anybody who has some insight into that, I would be keenly interested in that, because they've issued statements, but it's not statements that are needed right now. I mean, it helps, but I mean, it's not going to be decisive. Anybody?
Would any of our panelists like to respond to that one?
I mean, I did read today that President Maduro was going to be having naval officers or naval ships accompany future oil tankers, as they were going to continue to be doing that. So that I did read today that.
Yeah, I would also just add that, Venezuela has an all-weather strategic partnership with China. It has a strategic partnership with Russia. And I think the Russians said a couple of weeks ago that Venezuela hasn't asked for help. And I think that's remains the case, that Venezuela has yet to ask for help from either Russia or China in the face of these threats. We will see if things develop, if that changes, of course. I don't know if anyone else has, any of the other panelists have a response to that. If not, then I'll ask Nesbit to unmute. Go ahead, Nesbit.
First of all, thank you for having this webinar. Greetings to everyone. I wanted to go back to some of the statements that Yhamir said, and I think that many of the other speakers spoke to slightly. And that is this attack, this imperialism against Venezuela is not just Venezuela. It's against every country in the Caribbean, specifically, especially Colombia and Cuba. But not only those other two countries, it is very clear that Trump and his cadre and his fascist cadre are trying to dominate, intimidate, scare, and basically dominate the entire region and truly take the United States back to a time of the Monroe Doctrine. And this is something that we, as activists, we as Cuba activists, we as Venezuelan activists, we as progressives, period, must not tolerate. And we must come together as a united force to support not only Venezuela, Colombia, Cuba, and the entire United South. And one last thing, I think it is vitally important too that we look at the situation here in the United States. Many of us are on the list of the fascists in reference to being considered a danger to the United States. And very, very soon, just as they're shooting and killing people in boats, very, very soon they will be arresting and possibly shooting some of us without any cause, without any righteous purpose other than to intimidate, to try to make sure that Trump and his cadre last beyond their current term on infinitum. And it's vital that we come together as a united front, both here in the United States and in support of the various nations in the Caribbean. Thank you very much for recognizing me. Thank you.
Thank you, Nesbit. Anyone have any reflections they want to jump in with?
I can, but I'm wondering if we want to take a couple at a time or how you guys want to do it.
Oh, that's probably a good idea. That's always smart when we're shorter on time. That's true. John, I know you were also on the delegation. Go ahead, John Parker. Welcome.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, it was an honor to be in the delegation with the folks that are there, and it was a great experience. In terms of the vilification and as Maduro as a dictator, the Army and the Navy had that football game in Baltimore, and Trump was flown in through a helicopter with tons of security and things. Couldn't get near that guy. But the fact that I was able to go and shake hands and have a little comment thing with President Maduro, he didn't know who I was, but he didn't tell me what to say. And I'm looking around and I don't see any security, and not blatant security. I don't see much at all. I see him going around and not being afraid to talk to the people and be around the people. So that really, people don't like that. They don't like that to come out. The ruling class in the United States, they don't want to see that, because that makes that story look like it's a lie. That's one of the little bit of evidence of that. But the other great experience I was having was the one main thing we got to do in this country is to unite the working class. And that means you have to be united with the black and brown liberation struggles that are going on right now. And Venezuela was a great example of how you're doing that, starting from Chavez and others. The Simon Bolivar Institute. There were some organizations that we were working with there. Some were queer, but a lot of African forces, groups of African Venezuelans, and the marginalized groupings that now had a voice that was put in, that was part of the process of the people's assemblies. What a great thing! So they always say it goes two ways: our solidarity there and solidarity over here. And we're gonna be able to really unite our movement. We take those examples. That's it.
Okay, thank you, John, very much. So the next, I think that's actually all the questions we have for now, and probably if we could respond to what folks have said, and then we might close off this section and let our interpreters go about their nights, because usually we try and keep to about an hour and a half on these programs. So if we could just go ahead and do that. And then, like I said, we'll have a time after we close this formal section of the meeting for more discussion about building solidarity and a bit of an introduction to the Venezuela Solidarity Network. But Selena, I think you had some initial thoughts, if you don't mind starting.
Yeah, just maybe on the first point. I imagine everybody saw Trump's declaration on Tuesday, that I think is worth kind of, just on the point of the Monroe Doctrine, worth highlighting here with a couple of other thoughts. But so he wrote in a long rant that ended with, on the topic of Venezuelan oil, saying, America will not allow criminals, terrorists, or other countries to rob, threaten, or harm our nation, and likewise will not allow a hostile regime to, quote, take our oil, land, or any other assets, all of which must be returned to the United States immediately. Which is fascinating, because it's actually, it is something I've been hearing a lot, is like, I guess in this kind of stage of the decline of U.S. imperialism, is just this like desperate grab from imperial powers. And I think he's not talking about like U.S. oil or U.S. anything. He's talking about Venezuelan oil, and Venezuelan oil being what exactly is the quote? The U.S., our oil, our land, and any other assets. So it's like, that is the Monroe Doctrine, saying that there are two, that the U.S., that Latin America's U.S. is, that Latin America is the backyard of the U.S. And I think, it made me think also of something that, oddly enough, was an accurate analysis from Marco Rubio a few years ago that we wrote about, talking about kind of the impact. At the time, he was talking about sanctions, which are still very much a threat and very active, and we're seeing that with the seizure of, oil tankers and so on, and the sorts of justifications that are being used. But the more that U.S. imperial powers and their allies kind of have this untethered assault on Venezuela and other nations that are trying to kind of determine their own sovereign path. And I'm just going to read actually what he said, because it's not often that I agree with Marco Rubio, but he said, quote, we won't, and this was, I'll share it with the timeline and so on, but he said, we won't have to talk about sanctions in 5 years, because there will be so many countries transacting in currencies other than the dollar that we won't have the ability to sanction them. And so it's kind of like this, and now Marco Rubio, of course, is driving all of this. It's not in the interest of any other country's sovereignty, but just like, how can U.S. imperialism continue to kind of just take over other nations' resources and treat them like they're, a sort of U.S. colonial outpost. And so I think, yeah, it is. Maybe it was more of a comment than a question, but I think we are very much seeing like this, I don't know, this like kind of revindication of the Monroe Doctrine, but we're also seeing very like strong and steadfast resistance from Venezuelan people and from solidarity movements all across the world that aren't willing to let go of the sovereignty that they've fought hard for and won, and the sense of dignity as well. So.
Thank you. Elizabeth, do you want to offer some closing comments? And then Ray, I'll put up your photos as you give your closing comments, Ray, if that works for you. Okay, Elizabeth, please.
Yeah, I think that to sum up, part of what I heard with the focus of the comunas, because the comunas are really the way of, that is the socialist project. That is the alternative model. That is where the state is making a lot of investment. And one of the organizers within Unión Comunera put it to me, the state is giving the tools to the comunas to destroy the state. And that's the long-term vision. And so I think that's really, to really create that democratic participatory models in local neighborhoods throughout the country and build up that strength so that the current way of the state and its structure, and especially how, we think of it now has become something else. And so that is even all the more reason for us in the United States to make sure that that project goes forward. Because if that can happen in Venezuela, then that can also begin to happen in other countries. And so it's our responsibility to fight to make sure there's a space to do that.
Excellent. Thank you. And Ray.
Yeah, it's so great. I think being able to hear such like concrete details from the other panelists about the day-to-day fight that the Venezuelans are able to put up against really this absolute bully, right? Like the US empire is a bully, and I think I was really just touched. And John, by the way, John Parker, who's on this call, wrote a really fabulous piece. And I took away your observation about the calculated confidence of the people that really empowers them to fight back. And I think this is something that's like really missing from our movement, and we actually should grow, right? I think that there are reasons, there are obviously very concrete reasons why folks that we organize with sometimes feel very, just frustrated. And I think that when we look to, actually, if we look to the Palestinian resistance, when we look to the Venezuelan people, when we look to all these people around the world who are resisting the US empire, I think it really goes to show like we cannot just be sitting on our heels, right? But not only that, but there's like a palpable sense of joy and celebration of their own accomplishments that I just witnessed at every moment during this trip. And there's always dancing. There's always sort of, this like fight, just a love for the people and a belief in the Bolivarian revolution. And I think that's something that we can really, just kind of carry in our own hearts. And as we fight, like, how can we share that fire with the people that are also in the struggle, right? And when, one of the things that we talk about in the Anti-War Action Network is that like, your local chapter or your local organization or your local context might feel like really difficult at times. You face a lot of like sort of setbacks. But when you look across the country, and now we look across the world and we see the victories that are being won, like both on the ground and, in the consciousness, right? I think that to me is how we are able to just like, keep our energy and keep our momentum up. So yeah, it's like what an honor to be on this trip, and what an honor to be on this panel with you all. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Ray. It's really a special experience to talk to someone who's been to Venezuela for the first time. I think it's, always exciting to get your perspective. David, I see you have your camera off, so perhaps you've had to run away from us for a minute, but if you are there and would like to make any closing comments, go ahead. If not, we will move towards closing off this part of the meeting. I know David had another meeting, like many of us, had another meeting after this one. And I also did want to note that some emergency actions have also been called for today and tomorrow in response to Trump's escalating threats. So many people today were perhaps out on the streets organizing and were unable to participate in the webinar today, but it's been excellent so far. So as we close off this section, I would just give a big thank you to David Paul, to Yhamir Chabur, to Mairead Gillis, to Elizabeth Blaney, Ray Lee, and Selena De La Croce for joining us and for sharing your experiences on such, short notice. The webinar we wanted to organize today was, of course, in response to escalating threats, to the urgency of our work, but also with the understanding that building united front action in solidarity with Venezuela takes time and patience and coordination. And that's what we've been doing in the Venezuela Solidarity Network for the past 2 years. But the moment necessitates much more action and much more work together. And we need to figure out a way to do that and to organize ourselves for this coming period. So I hope today can just be a start to that and to fulfilling the commitment that we make every time, we talk to our Venezuelan co-fighters, which is we will do what we can to defend Venezuela's sovereignty and self-determination against the assaults of the Trump regime. And whether we're in Canada or the United States, we know that also means fighting for fundamental changes here, but it also means building, I think, a coalition that brings together many different forces on the basis of being against the invasion and attacks on Venezuela. And that's what we've set out to do with the VSN. Leonardo, thanks for co-chairing. If you have any closing comments for this section, and then we can stop the recording and let our translators head home.
No, just wanted to thank the interpreters as well and everyone for being here. We had some really great turnout. And stick around if you want to learn more about the VSN and find out how you can participate. Thank you, everyone.